I always thought I had it all figured out when it came to marriage. You marry someone you love, someone you trust, and if you're both loyal, everything works out in the end. That's what I believed with Lisa. We'd been married for 11 years, and not once did I ever doubt her. I trusted her completely. Sure, we had our moments. Every couple does. But at the end of the day, I knew we had something solid. At least, that's what I told myself. We'd make it through, no matter what. I never really let myself entertain the idea that Lisa would betray me. She wasn't like that. She wasn't like other women I'd heard about. It sounds naive now, but I truly believed that bad women, women who cheated, who lied, they were out there, but they weren't in my life. Lisa was different. I always pictured us growing old together, sitting on a porch, watching the sunset, still in love. That was the dream. I mean, I wasn't perfect. I knew that. I didn't have the money or the success I'd hoped for by this point. There were plenty of days I felt like I wasn't enough for her, but despite all that, I always believed in us. I believed in her. I remember thinking, Lisa would never do that to me. She's loyal, she's kind, and we've built too much together. I had my doubts about other things, whether I'd ever make enough money, whether I'd ever feel successful, but Lisa, I never doubted her. Looking back, maybe I should have seen the signs. Maybe I ignored them because I didn't want to face the possibility. I didn't want to believe that everything I had built, everything I trusted, could fall apart. But you know what they say. Life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. I can still remember the day my neighbor John came over. He's never the kind of guy to get involved in people's business, so when he knocked on my door, I knew something was up. He hesitated for a moment, like he didn't really want to say what was on his mind. "David," he said, shifting uncomfortably, "I don't know how to tell you this, and believe me, I wouldn't if I wasn't sure, but I've seen Lisa with 2 different guys, more than once." I just stared at him, completely frozen. At first I thought he was joking, or maybe he'd seen something out of context, but the way he looked at me, there was no doubt in his eyes. He meant every word. "2 guys?" I asked, as if repeating it would make it less real. John nodded, and it felt like the ground shifted beneath me. My heart started racing, but my mind refused to believe it. I mean, Lisa, my Lisa. There had to be some kind of mistake. "You sure it was her?" I asked, trying to sound calm, though I could feel the panic building inside me. "Yeah, I'm sure, David. I didn't want to believe it either, but I've seen her with them. Different times, different places. I thought you should know." I thanked him and shut the door, but the words kept echoing in my head. Lisa, with 2 different guys. It didn't make sense. None of it did. I stood there in the living room, just staring at nothing, trying to process what John had just told me. My first instinct was to deny it. There had to be another explanation, right? Maybe they were just friends. Maybe there was some perfectly innocent reason for it. But the more I thought about it, the more doubts started creeping in. Could it be true? Was Lisa really cheating on me? With 2 different men? I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I started thinking about the little things, how she'd been more distant lately, how she'd been coming home later, how her phone seemed to be glued to her hand. Things I had brushed off before now felt like glaring red flags. But still, I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to. I didn't want to be that guy, the guy who doesn't see it coming, the guy who's blindsided. But in that moment, I felt like maybe I was. I sat down, my head spinning, and the reality of it all started to sink in. The thought of Lisa with someone else, with 2 other men, it was like a punch to the gut. I didn't know what to do, what to think, and that's when the doubt turned into something darker. I felt this rage building inside of me. If it was true, if she had really done this to me, I wasn't just going to walk away quietly. No, they were all going to pay. After John told me, I felt like I was living in some alternate reality. None of it made sense. I kept telling myself there had to be some kind of mistake. Maybe he saw someone else. Maybe he was wrong. How could Lisa, the woman I had been with for over a decade, the woman I trusted with everything, do something like this? For days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It was like my mind was on a loop, replaying John's words over and over. Two different guys. It didn't seem possible, but once that seed of doubt was planted, it started growing. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't stop myself from noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. Her late nights at work, the times she'd come home and say she was exhausted, the phone calls she'd step out to take, and how she seemed distracted, distant. At first, I had brushed it all off as normal life stuff. Work stress, family stuff, the usual things that happen after so many years together. But now, everything felt like evidence. But even with all that, I couldn't bring myself to confront her. I didn't want it to be true. I wanted to hang on to the idea that Lisa was the person I thought she was, the person I had always believed in. I'd sit at the kitchen table, watching her across the room, wondering if everything we had built was a lie. But then I'd see her smile or hear her laugh, and for a moment I'd convince myself that I was being paranoid. How could someone who seemed so genuine be capable of this? I started questioning myself. Was I overreacting? Was I just being insecure? There was this constant war going on inside me. Half of me desperately wanting to believe that everything was fine, that John was wrong, and the other half screaming that something wasn't right. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work. Every time I saw her, the doubt gnawed at me, but I wasn't ready to confront it. I'd check her phone when she wasn't around, but there was nothing obvious. No suspicious texts or emails, no clear signs that she was hiding something. And that just made it worse. It made me feel crazy. I wanted to find something that would either prove John wrong or give me the confirmation I needed, but there was nothing. I didn't know what to do. How do you confront someone you love when you're not even sure you want the answer? What if I asked her and she denied it? What if I asked her and she admitted it? I wasn't ready for either of those outcomes. So I kept quiet. I acted like everything was normal, even though inside I felt like I was coming apart at the seams. The trust I had in Lisa was slipping away, and I didn't know how to hold on to it. But I couldn't let go either. Not yet. I wasn't ready for the truth, but I knew I couldn't hide from it forever. I think what really started to break me wasn't just the idea of Lisa cheating. It was what it did to how I saw myself. The more I thought about it, the more I started questioning everything about who I was, what I had become, and what I hadn't achieved. I'd look in the mirror and barely recognize the guy staring back at me. I mean, what kind of husband am I if my wife's stepping out with not one but two guys? What did that say about me? About what I had to offer? I've never been the most successful guy. I didn't make the kind of money I had hoped to by this point in my life, and maybe I wasn't the most exciting person either. Maybe I'd gotten comfortable or worse, boring. Was that it? Was I not enough for her anymore? I started wondering if I ever had been. And then I began comparing myself to those guys, these mystery men who somehow took my place. Were they better looking? Younger? More successful? I mean, they had to be, right? I pictured them being the kind of guys who had everything, money, charisma, everything I lacked. The thought of her choosing them over me, it was like a punch in the gut. I started thinking back on my life, on all the things I hadn't achieved, all those moments where I felt like a failure, like I was never quite good enough. And now it felt like this affair was proof. Proof that I had failed not just as a man, but as a husband. I wasn't providing enough. I wasn't interesting enough. I wasn't enough. Period. It wasn't just about Lisa anymore. It was about me, about who I was, or maybe who I wasn't. I couldn't help but replay all the times I didn't measure up, all the moments I wasn't the man I thought I should be. And now, with everything going on, it felt like I was paying the price for all of it. Like this was what I deserved. There were moments when I wondered if this was somehow my fault. Maybe I had pushed her away. Maybe in trying to be the good husband, the one who provided, who worked hard, who stayed loyal, I had missed something. Maybe she needed more, and that thought that maybe I wasn't enough for her, that was the hardest part to swallow. I kept thinking, if I had been a better man, if I had been more successful, more confident, more everything, maybe none of this would have happened. It tore me apart. I started avoiding people, avoiding conversations. I didn't want to explain why I looked so exhausted all the time, why I was barely holding it together. Because deep down, I felt like I wasn't holding it together at all. I was unraveling, piece by piece, and the worst part, I wasn't sure if I even wanted to stop it. I couldn't take it anymore. The doubts, the sleepless nights, the constant second-guessing, it was eating me alive. I had to know the truth, even if it destroyed me. So one night, after dinner, I finally worked up the courage to confront Lisa. We were sitting there, just the two of us, like everything was normal. But nothing felt normal. My heart was pounding, my hands were shaking under the table. I kept going over the words in my head. How do you ask your wife if she's been with not one but two other men? I didn't want to explode. I didn't want to accuse her without giving her a chance to speak. But the weight of it all was too much. So I just said it. Lisa, we need to talk. She looked up from her phone, a little surprised. What's up? I hesitated for a second. Part of me still didn't want to believe it, didn't want to go through with it, but I had to. Are you cheating on me? The silence that followed was like nothing I've ever felt before. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Lisa's face went pale. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me like she couldn't believe I had asked. But her eyes, they gave her away. I saw the guilt before she said a word. What? David, what are you talking about? Her voice wavered, like she was trying to hold it together, but I wasn't buying it. I had seen that look before, on people trying to cover up something they couldn't. I know about them, I said, my voice trembling. John told me. 2 guys, Lisa. 2. How long has this been going on? Her reaction said it all. Her face crumbled. She started to cry, but not the kind of crying that makes you feel sympathy. It was the kind of crying that makes you feel sick, the kind that's filled with guilt. I didn't mean for it to happen. She whispered through the tears. I'm sorry, David. I'm so sorry. Hearing those words, it was like a knife twisting in my gut. So it was true, all of it. The late nights, the distance, the lies. She had been seeing not just one, but 2 other men behind my back. How long? I asked, my voice shaking now with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. How long has this been going on? She hesitated, like she didn't want to tell me, but she knew she couldn't hide it anymore. About a year, she finally admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. A year. My wife had been living a double life for an entire year. I couldn't even process it. It was like the floor had disappeared beneath me and I was just falling, endlessly falling. Why, Lisa? I asked, my voice quieter now, almost desperate. Why would you do this? Wasn't I enough? She didn't have an answer. Or maybe she did, but she didn't know how to say it. All she could do was cry and apologize, over and over, like that would fix anything. But it didn't fix anything. It just made it worse. I stood up, my head spinning, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to scream, I wanted to throw something, I wanted to make her feel the pain she had caused me. But instead, I just walked out. I couldn't be there anymore. I couldn't look at her. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away from her, away from everything. My world had just shattered in front of me, and I didn't know what to do next. I thought confronting Lisa would give me some kind of closure, something concrete to hold on to, even if it was painful. But what it really did was tear me apart in ways I didn't know were possible. For days after, I couldn't think straight. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. My mind just kept going back to the same horrible place. Those images of her, with them. The thought of her being with two other men while I was here, clueless, living in some fantasy where everything was fine. It was like a poison running through my veins, turning everything I thought I knew into something toxic. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I didn't see it. How could I have been so blind? Was I that naive, that trusting? I started hating myself for not seeing the signs earlier, the late nights, the excuses, the distance between us that I had ignored because I trusted her. I trusted her more than I trusted anyone in my life, and she used that trust to tear me apart. It felt like I was being crushed under the weight of it, like I was drowning, and every breath I took was just more pain, more anger. There were moments when I couldn't even catch my breath, when it felt like my chest was going to cave in from the pressure of it all. And the rage. God. The rage was something I didn't even know I was capable of. It wasn't just sadness. It wasn't just betrayal. It was fury. I wanted to hurt them. I wanted them to feel what I was feeling. The idea of revenge wasn't just a passing thought, it was the only thing that kept me going. I pictured it. I pictured making them pay, every single one of them. Lisa, those two guys, they weren't going to get away with this. Not after what they had done to me. But then there was this other part of me, this broken, fragile part of me that just wanted to curl up and disappear. It felt like I was nothing. Like I had been hollowed out, and there was nothing left inside but pain. I would sit in the dark, my head in my hands, just trying to hold myself together, but it felt like I was coming apart at the seams. The memories of us, the life we had built, the plans we had made. It all felt like a cruel joke. How could it be real when she had been living this lie for a year? I kept wondering, did she ever really love me? Or was it all just a facade? Was I just some fool she settled for while she lived her real life somewhere else? I wanted to scream. I wanted to break everything around me just to match how broken I felt inside. But no matter how much I raged, no matter how much I hurt, nothing changed. The betrayal was still there, and the life I thought we had was gone. I don't know how many nights I spent like that, sleepless, lost, feeling like a ghost in my own life. But every night felt like an eternity, like I was trapped in some nightmare I couldn't wake up from. And the worst part? I didn't know if I ever would. I found myself standing at a crossroads not knowing which way to turn. It's strange. After everything Lisa had done, after the lies and the betrayal, you'd think the decision would be simple. Leave. Walk away. But it wasn't. It wasn't simple at all. I'd wake up in the morning, exhausted from another night of no sleep, and my first thought would be to leave. Pack my bags, walk out the door, and never look back. She didn't deserve me. She didn't deserve anything. The thought of staying with her after what she did, it made me sick. But then, as the day wore on, doubt would creep in. We had built a life together, 11 years. You don't just walk away from that, do you? There were good times, great times even, and those memories would flood back, pulling me in two directions at once. One minute, I wanted to burn it all to the ground. The next, I was questioning if I could fix it, if there was still something worth saving. Could I stay with her? Could I ever look at her the same way again? The thought of touching her, holding her, it felt wrong, tainted. But then, leaving her meant walking away from everything we'd built, everything I thought we had. Was I really ready to start over, to let go of the future we had planned? I didn't know if I had the strength to leave. I didn't know if I had the strength to stay. And then there was another thought, one I hadn't expected: revenge. It started as a whisper, a fleeting idea that came and went. But the more I thought about it, the louder it got. Why should I just walk away? Why should I let her and those two guys get off easy? They had ruined my life. Why shouldn't I ruin theirs? It wasn't like me, those thoughts. But I couldn't stop them. I didn't want to stop them. If I was going to leave, I couldn't just walk away quietly. No. They needed to feel what I was feeling. They needed to know what it was like to have their lives torn apart. But then I'd question myself again. Is that who I really am? Am I the guy who burns everything down just to feel better? Would revenge make me whole again? Or would it just pull me deeper into the pain? Every day felt like a new battle. Stay or leave, forgive or punish. I'd go back and forth in my head, but no matter how many times I weighed the options, I couldn't find a clear answer. The only thing I knew for sure was that nothing would ever be the same again, no matter what I decided. I couldn't do it alone anymore. The weight of everything was too much to carry by myself. I needed to talk to someone, anyone, who could help me make sense of the chaos in my head. So I reached out to the people I thought could give me some perspective. The first person I called was my brother Tom. We hadn't spoken about anything serious in a while, but I knew I could count on him. He listened as I poured everything out. How Lisa had been seeing two guys behind my back, how I didn't know whether to stay or leave, or if I could even find a way to forgive her. When I was done, there was a long silence on the other end. And then he said, "David, if it were me, I'd walk. You deserve better than this. She doesn't deserve your loyalty." Hearing him say it so bluntly, it hit hard. Part of me knew he was right, but another part of me wasn't ready to accept it. Still, I thanked him and hung up, but his words stuck with me. You deserve better. Did I? I also talked to my best friend, Mark. He's always been the level-headed one, the guy who never lets his emotions get the best of him. I thought maybe he'd offer some kind of different perspective, something more measured. He listened, like Tom did, but his advice was different. I get that you're hurt, man, but this is your marriage. 11 years. If there's still love there, maybe it's worth fighting for. People make mistakes. Maybe she's not one of the good ones, but that doesn't mean it's over if you don't want it to be. I wanted to believe that too. That maybe, just maybe, there was something left to save. But how do you fight for something when it feels like everything's been shattered? Finally, I spoke to my mum. She's always been my rock, the person I could turn to when I didn't know what to do, and she didn't hold back. David, no one deserves to be treated like that. You're better than this. She knew exactly what she was doing, and you don't owe her anything. Walk away. Start over. The more people I talked to, the more I realized that no one could give me the answer. Not really, because at the end of the day, it wasn't their decision to make, it was mine. But their words helped me see one thing. I wasn't alone in this. Even if I didn't know what to do yet, I had people who cared about me, people who had my back. And maybe that was enough to take the next step, whatever that was. As the days passed, something inside me started to change. The sadness, the heartbreak, it was still there, but it was getting drowned out by something stronger, something darker, anger. Not just at Lisa, but at the two men she had been with. They had all taken something from me, my trust, my dignity, and now they were living their lives without a care in the world, while I was left to pick up the pieces. I couldn't let that stand. I wasn't just going to walk away quietly, leaving them to move on as if nothing had happened. Number. They needed to feel what I was feeling. They needed to pay for what they had done. At first, it was just a thought, something that crept in late at night when I couldn't sleep. But the more I thought about it, the more I knew I couldn't let it go. I had to do something. I couldn't just be the victim in all this, so I started to plan. I knew I couldn't just confront them directly. What good would that do? Yelling at them wouldn't make me feel better, but hitting them where it hurt? That was different. They had lives, reputations, careers. I knew enough to make sure they felt the consequences of what they had done. I started digging into their lives, who they were, what they did, where they worked. It wasn't hard to find. In today's world, everything's online if you know where to look. And I looked. I wanted to know everything about these men, the ones who thought they could step into my life and destroy it without a second thought. And as for Lisa, I wasn't done with her either. I couldn't just let her walk away without facing the consequences. People thought we were the perfect couple. Everyone admired what we had. They needed to know the truth. She had been living a lie for over a year, and I was going to make sure everyone saw her for who she really was. I started gathering everything: text messages, emails, photos, anything I could use to expose them. I wanted to destroy their lives the way they had destroyed mine. But here's the thing about revenge. It's a dangerous path. Every step I took down that road, I felt myself slipping further away from who I used to be. I wasn't the David I had been before. This was someone new, someone colder. And the more I planned, the more I realized that there was no going back. I knew that once I started, once I pulled the trigger on this plan, it would change everything. But I didn't care. In fact, I wanted it to. I wanted them to feel the weight of what they had done. And if that meant becoming someone different, someone willing to burn everything down to get justice, then so be it. I was ready for it. So I prepared, quietly, methodically. I waited for the right moment to set it all in motion. And when I did, it wouldn't just be about getting even. It would be about taking back control of my life, my dignity. They thought they had taken everything from me, but they had no idea what was coming. Not yet. I thought revenge would fix it. I thought making them all pay would somehow take away the pain, the anger, and for a moment, it did. When I saw the fallout, when I watched their lives start to crumble the way mine had, there was a part of me that felt satisfied. But that feeling didn't last. After the dust settled, after the chaos I caused, I was still left with the same question. What now? The revenge didn't bring me peace. It didn't undo the betrayal, and it didn't make me feel whole again. In fact, it left me with more emptiness than I'd expected, because once you cross that line, there's no going back. And the person I had become in the process, angry, cold, driven by vengeance, that wasn't who I wanted to be. So I had to find a different path. It wasn't easy, but slowly I started to shift my focus. Instead of thinking about Lisa and the men, I started thinking about me. What did I need to move forward? What did I need to heal? I stopped obsessing over them and started taking care of myself. I cut ties with Lisa for good this time. I stopped checking on the damage I had done to the men. It wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, about reclaiming my life and my identity. I started spending time with people who truly cared about me, my family, my friends. They'd been there for me, even when I was lost in my anger, and I realized I needed them now more than ever. They reminded me of who I was before all this happened. And little by little, I started to feel like myself again. I went back to therapy, something I'd brushed off before, thinking I didn't need it. But now I knew I did. I needed to unpack everything that had happened, not just with Lisa, but the way I had let it tear me down to the core. The sessions helped. They gave me a space to let go of the guilt, the shame, the anger. And I learned something in that process. Healing isn't about erasing the pain. It's about learning to live with it, learning to let it shape you without letting it define you. I realized that what Lisa did to me, it wasn't a reflection of who I was. It was a reflection of her. I wasn't weak. I wasn't a failure. I was stronger than I had given myself credit for. I had survived the worst betrayal of my life, and I was still standing. It didn't happen overnight. It didn't even happen in weeks or months. But eventually, I started to find peace, not in the revenge I had taken, but in the decision to move forward, to leave the past where it belonged, behind me. I wasn't looking for anyone. After everything that happened with Lisa, I didn't think I had it in me to trust someone again. The idea of opening up, of being vulnerable, it scared me. But life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. Her name was Jessica. We met through a mutual friend, just by chance. It wasn't one of those movie moments where sparks fly and everything falls into place. No, it was quieter than that, simpler. And I think that's what I needed. At first, I kept my guard up. I wasn't ready to let anyone get too close, and she didn't push. We started talking. Just casual conversations at first, about work, about life. But there was something different about her. She didn't pry. She didn't try to fix me. She just listened. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to pretend. I didn't have to put on a brave face or hide the scars from what had happened with Lisa. Jessica understood that I was still healing, and she gave me the space to do that. We started spending more time together, and before I knew it, something started to shift inside me. It wasn't the whirlwind romance you see in movies, but it was real. It was grounded. I began to realize that maybe I could trust again, that maybe not everyone would betray me the way Lisa had. I'll be honest. There were moments where the fear crept back in, moments where I'd catch myself pulling away, afraid to let her in too much. But Jessica had this way of being patient. She never demanded anything from me, and in return, I found myself opening up more than I thought I could. She knew about what happened with Lisa. I told her everything. And instead of judgment or pity, she just nodded and listened. She didn't try to compare herself to Lisa or prove she was better. She just was there. And that made all the difference. The more time I spent with her, the more I realized that love didn't have to be built on fireworks or grand gestures. It could be something steady, something that grew over time, built on trust, respect, and understanding. I wasn't fully healed. I still had my scars, and I knew they'd always be there. But with Jessica, I didn't feel like I had to hide them. I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt hopeful. Like maybe, after everything, there was still a chance for happiness. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could have a future again. A future that didn't include the pain of the past, but something new. Something better. It's strange to think about where I am now, compared to where I was not that long ago. If you had told me back then, when everything was falling apart, that I'd be sitting here, feeling happy again, I wouldn't have believed it. Back then, happiness felt impossible, like something I'd never get back. But here I am. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like I woke up one day and everything was fine. No, it was slow. It took time. Time to heal. Time to let go of the anger, the pain, and the betrayal. But most importantly, it took time to learn to live again, to trust myself again. With Jessica, it was different. I didn't feel like I had to be someone I wasn't. I didn't have to pretend that I was healed or that the past didn't hurt. She saw me, scars and all, and still chose to stay. And that, more than anything, helped me find a new kind of happiness. It wasn't the kind of happiness I thought I'd have. It wasn't the picture-perfect fairy tale ending I had once imagined. It was real. It was honest. It was earned. I realized that happiness isn't about never facing pain. It's about finding the strength to move through it. And in the end, still choosing to hope. Still choosing to love. The scars are still there. They'll always be there. But they don't define me anymore. They don't control my life. I've learned that it's possible to build something new, even after everything crumbles, to find peace, even after the storm, and to love again, even after your heart has been shattered. So yeah, I found my happiness. Not the one I thought I'd have, but maybe the one I was meant to find all along.